I am so excited to have relaunched my Practically Positive podcast, Let's Get Talking. It's more than mindset. That's what I've called the podcast because although lots of what I talk about is absolutely a mindset shift, it's about putting yourself in that position to choose what your mindset is going to be. I'm also going to offer lots of practical tips, things you can do to build daily positive habits, and of course, have lots of fabulous guests that are going to share their stories, their experiences of how they have shifted their mindset, how they have come at things from a different perspective to be able to do the things they now do. Some of those stories will be, about topics that are difficult, that still are taboo subjects, and I want to break that taboo so we're not finding that people don't want to have those conversations. Some of them will be me talking and sharing experiences I've had, things that I've noticed, all sorts of different things are going to come up. But I hope that in this series, you will find something that you can relate to, something you can put into practice, and hopefully help you see that with the right mindset and the right tools, anything is possible. Hi, everybody. In this first episode, I'm going to reintroduce myself, explain a little bit more about what I hope to achieve in this podcast and some of the topics that might be coming up. So the reason I started this podcast 2-3 years ago, when I did the first lot of episodes, was because I wanted to share those stories that didn't get spoken about. So I come from a broken home. I hate that phrase. But when I was 5, that is the term that was used for families that were what I like to call now blended. And so I touch on that. There's actually an episode right back at the start of this where I had to relearn how to reframe what that looked like. And for me, that was one of the biggest, reframes that I've ever had to do. In the little 5-year-old me had made this unrealistic promise to herself that when she grew up and she had a family, that would not be the case, and there would be this family unit. And if you go back and listen to the episode, I explain it in a lot more detail. But the point was that today, 47-year-old me has that family unit that little 5-year-old me promised herself. It just looks different. And that is because I have had to work really hard to make it look different. I was faced with a couple of choices, neither of which I wanted. I felt like life was happening to me and I had no control over what was going on. And I think lots of us, when we're faced with things, whether that's the breakdown of relationships, whether that's losing a job, whether that's health problems, whether that's loss in any way, we feel like this stuff is happening to us and we feel out of control. And as humans, we don't like that. We struggle with it because we don't like the unknown. We are forced to come out of our comfort zone. We are forced into changing and we don't want to do that. And so once I learned that while they were two terrible choices, neither of which were the thing I would have actually chosen in an ideal world, that once I took control and I made the choice myself, it stopped happening to me and I took back that power. And like I say, I had to do a lot of work on that as to what that looked like. And I think we're so programmed into what a perfect family should look like, that, 2 parents, a house, a car, a child, whatever it might be, that you think that society tells us. You watch movies, you read books, we just see it around us. And I'm proud today to beat the drum for co-parenting and for blended families. Is it what I would have chosen? Absolutely not. I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, it's absolutely all rosy. It faces lots of challenges. But if I dwelled on that, if I dwelled on it wasn't what I wanted, I would never be where I am. I'd be stuck in that, and I'd be in resentfulness, and I'd be in anger, and I'd be in frustration, and I'd be in hurt. And I didn't want to live in those things. So I took back my power. I made a choice, and I have made, I think, the situation we're in work really well for all of us. And today, like I say, that little 5-year-old girl inside of me has what she always wanted, which is 2 parents that put the little one first, who are there to support each other, who will make sure that the other people, the three of us in that family unit, are all getting what we need, getting the right support, getting the right time, etc. And that took a massive, big reframe. Like I say, you can go back and listen to that episode in a little more detail. But I like to always share that, and I share it lots when I do talks because it's a huge one that we just take on board. Oh, that's what something should look like. Anyone that's just listened to me before or listened to me, followed me on social media, knows I can't stand the word should. It puts such an expectation on ourselves. It absolutely puts so much pressure on ourselves, either from other people or from ourselves. And nine times out of 10, it is us putting that pressure on ourselves because we are absorbing the things externally. I heard someone share something the other day that says you can't directly influence somebody to do something, but you can absolutely put obstacles in their way to stop them from doing it. And I love that. I absolutely love that because I talk all the time about not being able to control somebody else's actions, not be able to change how somebody behaves, other than by that ripple effect of if you put boundaries in place, if you show up as your true self, how you put yourself out there and how you say, this is the respect I deserve, this is the space I am going to take up, then by default, people around you have to respect those boundaries or not come near you. They have to then fit into that space you've created. You're not trying to bend and mold to make other people feel comfortable. So indirectly, you will affect how they show up because you're putting those boundaries in place or you're setting out those expectations. However, I love the fact that this person said that you can absolutely put obstacles in people's way because that will absolutely change. And when we look at that, when we sort of think, right, what obstacles can we take away? We look at that for ourselves as well. What obstacles are we putting in our own way? If we move them, we still might not get to where we want to be. The thing still might not happen, but we will see the solution much, much easier. And we will start to see solutions rather than problems. And it has a huge impact on then what we do and how we show up. And I love that. So I will, in some future episodes, absolutely come back. I might even get Kat on if she wants to chat about that a little bit more, because I think it's a really interesting concept. But the other thing I want to touch on for this opening episode tonight is something I've been saying to myself I was going to talk about since November. I went at the back end of last year on a fabulous business retreat with some absolutely amazing women who will be appearing in this season over the next couple of months. But we had a fantastic guest on the podcast, on the business retreat, that had her own podcast. And I guess that's what spurred me into wanting to relaunch this one again, and seeing the power that has. So her podcast is a fabulous lady called Jenny, and her podcast is called Sliding Doors. Now, if you're of a certain age, that will bring up absolute images of Gwyneth Paltrow and a train. That is what it is based on, or that's the concept it is based on. Jenny too was a huge fan of said film, and she loved the concept that what seems to be one small, insignificant at the time moment can have then a huge ripple effect on what happens. But actually, when we look back at our lives, when we, in reflection, at the time, don't realize it's a pivotal moment. But when we look back on reflection, passing conversations, opportunities, missed opportunities sometimes, become that sliding door moment. And so the whole concept of her podcast is speaking to guests about their sliding door moment. And actually, we'll have lots of them in our lives. So my very first one, when I look back, my very first sliding door moment was actually not my moment. It was the moment my mum left and my dad became a single parent, which, like I say, 40 plus years ago was very unusual. And it was more unusual that the children stayed with the dad. Now, that was my very first sliding door moment. That in that moment, 5-year-old me, like I say, made that promise to myself. And I've had several over the years, from dad being poorly to mum getting cancer to my fertility issues. There's an episode all about that I talk with the wonderful Lisa, all about fertility. And to then my marriage breaking down. These are all really huge, pivotal sliding door moments. And so I want to just ask you guys, do you, what are your sliding door moments? Have you thought about that and the impact that's had and how it has then carved who you've become? Because these are huge lessons in how we can learn to shift that mindset, how we can learn to take what happens to us and not define us. I do believe everything that happens to us is part of the ingredient of who we are. But how we let that then impact how we show up is back on us once we have the right tools. And I think, like I say, 5-year-old me didn't have the right tools back then. Probably 25-year-old me didn't have the right tools, to be fair, a lot of the time. But learning those things, learning to look at those with a little bit of perspective, because that's what hindsight gives us, and learning how we coped in those situations, what tools we had, what tools we didn't have, and how do we get them for next time, can be hugely, hugely pivotal. So one of my other sliding door moments, I guess, was a day, and I share this lots when I do workshops with in recovery. I talk about this a huge amount. For those that don't know and haven't followed me before, I do a 12-step program called Al-Anon. It is absolutely, to me, invaluable. In fact, I think the whole world should do a 12-step program. It is unbelievable. My step on today is I am powerless over people, places, and things, because life happens and people are people-y. And it drives me up the wall at times where you have a situation that you would go into in a certain frame of mind, you would go into with certain expectations, you behave a certain way, and you get there and the other people haven't got that memo. They are not behaving the way you would like them to behave. They are not responding to the things that you would like them to do. They are on their own agenda, didn't get the memo, and it can be very frustrating. Sometimes it's a case of getting clear on those expectations and those boundaries. Other times it's just out of your control and you've got to let go what you can't do anything about. There's a fab prayer that I've actually got tattooed on the back of my neck called the Serenity Prayer. And I have known this since I was knee-high. My grandma had a tapestry of it, people used to do cross-stitch. And I didn't really understand it until I was in my probably late 20s. And even then I struggled with part of it. So the prayer, it's called the Serenity Prayer. You can call it a prayer, you can call it a poem, whatever you like. But it is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I never really fully understood what that meant. And then as I got older, like I say, got into my 20s, really sort of understood that actually there are things I just need to let go of. There are things that are not my problem, that are not in my control. And so wasting time and energy and emotion worrying about them, trying to change them, trying to go back to something that wasn't or will never be, is just exhausting and a waste of time and actually only punishing me. I do need courage to change the things that I can change. So when my marriage was breaking down, I absolutely needed the courage to have that conversation and say, this is not working. I can't stay in this situation. We've tried to fix it. We've tried to put it back together again. That took me 18 months to find the courage to have that conversation, from knowing I had to do something about it to actually being able to do something. And that's where my empowerment arrows come from. Anyone that has seen me do my arrow breaks, that was my very first arrow. I wrote strength on it. And I've still got it. If you come into my house, it's right the first thing you'll see as you come in my house. Because that reminds me every day that I have got more strength in me than I believed I had. And that if I courage and summon that strength, it is incredible what I can achieve and what I can do. And I didn't intend to do that as a job. I didn't intend to do this. But that moment for me was very much a sliding door moment. That was an absolute pivotal moment that said, in fact, it wasn't even like I said, oh, I need to do this. It was a compulsion. I didn't have a choice. I was like, I need to know how to do this because I need to share this with other people. It had such a huge impact. It literally changed my life. Not only changed our family unit and what that looks like today, but changed what I do for a business, changed what my business is and how I live every single day. And I'm grateful for that. Was it a situation I would have chosen? Absolutely not. But I summoned up the courage to do something about it, because it does take courage to do anything new, to do anything that's change, even when it's good change. We are creatures of habit. And being able to unlock that courage and that strength inside of us, being able to access it, is a huge gift. And I am privileged I get to share that and give that to other people. So the serenity prayer was that. And I thought I'd nailed it. Absolutely, I'm going to let go, Frozen styly. Let it go, let it go. You know, we all know the song. We've all done it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to let that go. That's not my problem. I'm not going to worry about that. It isn't always easy, but I practice it. And I had the courage, and I made big changes. So I was like, yeah, tick, tick, I've got that. Where I tripped up, and lots of people do, was that third line, the wisdom to know the difference. I feel like I need it on a t-shirt. Like I say, I've got a tattooed on my neck, but it's in Chinese, so I can't read it. But I do know it. I do know it now. It is the wisdom to know the difference, because how much time, and I'm asking you all this as a question now, how much time have you wasted worrying about, stressing about, thinking about, getting upset about, getting angry about things that you have no control over? How much of your life have you wasted? We've only all got a finite amount of time. It's the one thing none of us have any control over. So use it wisely. Don't waste it on things that you can't do anything about. I'm going to see Mel Robbins in a couple of weeks. I am beyond excited to go and see her. I'm actually going to meet her. I say it now, I still can't believe it's one of those pinch me moments. But she talks all about, and the whole tour that she's doing is all about let them do it. And if somebody says to me now, oh, this person's done this, let them do it. Doesn't bother me. And once you give, she says this, once you give other people permission to have their thoughts about you and have their opinions about you and do what they want to do, it frees you up no end. It is incredible how much power you take back by giving other people permission to do what they want. Let them do it. Let them do it. Because all of a sudden, all of these plates that you're spinning, all of this baggage you're carrying around, all these spoons you are using, doing other things for other people, just all go. It is incredible. And so I'm so excited. I'm sure there'll be multiple episodes after I've been to see Mel, all about the things that she talks about. But yeah, the back to my point, I do have Billy Connolly syndrome. I go off on tangents. I mostly come back to what I was talking about, not always. But I was talking about the serenity prayer, that wisdom to know the difference. And it's a great habit to practice being aware of. It takes lots and lots of practice to do. And I say this from experience, that knowing and having the wisdom to know the difference is so powerful. Because for a long time, I was like, I can affect that, I can do that, I can do. And my free will was stronger than I call it my higher power, but whatever else, the universe, whatever you want to call it. But learning to have the wisdom and go, look, is this within my power directly to do anything about? If it's not, I will then not waste another minute. If I can do something about it, that's when the hard work starts. Because the easy bit's letting stuff go once you practice it. The easy bit is letting stuff go. The hard stuff is making the changes. The hard stuff is facing up things. But hopefully, if you follow me and if you listen to these podcasts, I will start to give you tools to help you expand that toolkit. I use very practical analogies when I talk about things. And I always say, sometimes our emotional intelligence, our emotional language, and the ability to communicate with that is like having a really small toolkit. So we start off and we've got a nail and we've got a hammer, and we're quite proficient at that. We can hammer a nail into the wall. Great, that is marvellous. And we can bob along quite happily as long as people just keep giving us nails, off we go. However, somebody will come along, people, places, things, somebody will come along and give us a screw. Now, I can use my hammer to hammer the screw into the wall, and I will get the job done, but it'll be more difficult to hammer that screw in. And also, it's going to make quite a big mess in the wall. And I always think this is when we don't have the right tools, the right job. We will sometimes still get the job done, but there will be a bit of a mess around it, whether that's physical or emotional. It will be a bit of a messy experience. And as you get through that analogy, the tools get bigger. The more tools we can have, the more prepared we are for the various jobs. If somebody then said they needed a wall knocked down, I would need a much bigger hammer. I'd need a sledgehammer rather than my little one for knocking nails in. It's about having the right capacity to do the job at hand. And so hopefully these positive habits that I'm going to introduce to you, like I say, the coming episodes, and the conversations you will hear, other people's experiences, will help you build up that toolkit. So that when you hit your next sliding door moment, you actually have an ability to deal with it in a much more efficient and a much less damaging way. The last thing I want to leave you with for this little intro episode is just a reminder, though, to be kind to yourself. Because all too often, when we reflect and we look back at these sliding door moments, we look back at the things that have shaped where we are today and how we got here, and I do that a lot of the time, we beat ourselves up for past bad decisions and past bad choices. And goodness knows I have made a few. But my beautiful granddad used to always say, regret the things you do, not the things you don't do. And for a long time, I was like, that makes no sense. You shouldn't have any regrets, granddad. But what he means is, if there's a chance to do something, give it a go, because the what ifs will wear you down. If you've done something that isn't the best choice you've ever made, or that you wouldn't do again, as long as you're learning from that, then actually it's still not a regret because you've learned something from it. Where it becomes an issue is if you keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. And we've all heard that before. That is the definition of insanity. But if you're doing things and you're experiencing them and you're giving it a go, then even if it doesn't work out, even if you sit back and go, that was not the wisest move, you learn, you grow, you take in all that knowledge and that experience, and you do better the next time. Because that is how we grow as humans. That is how we become who we are, by learning from what we've done. What we've done doesn't define who we are. But we are made up of some of those parts. So we have to look back with kindness and love and know that in those moments when we maybe did make bad choices, when we maybe didn't handle things the way we would handle them today, we did the best we could at the time with the tools we had at the time. And when you can do that, you can then let go of those things that are no longer serving you, those things you're carrying around and beating yourself up over. You can let them go with love, with compassion, and it makes such a difference. And it also makes it easier to go forwards. I talk an awful lot. There's a really great analogy that I just love. If you ever hear me talking anywhere, this will be mentioned because I absolutely love it. It's my favourite reframe, and it is taking the fear out of failure. We all getting our own way. We're our own biggest obstacle 99% of the time. Because we either listen to something somebody else has said and we believe it to be true, or we just over experience and have talked ourselves into it. The power that we have when we talk to ourselves and to others, but especially to ourselves, is incredible. Lots of what I teach is based on NLP, so neuro linguistic programming. It literally is the science of how we program our brains, and we can retrain that. And that's why I love it. I love understanding how that programming works, how things can be misfiled, but that gives us the possibility to reframe them and refile them. And one of the things that most of us are scared of is that fear of failure, that fear of, oh, what if? What if this happens? What if somebody laughs? What if it doesn't work out? What if? But what if it does? We need to start framing that in a positive way. And so this reframe, like I say, this analogy for me is one of my favourites, that we need to start thinking fail as first attempt in learning. And I love that. So first attempt in learning. Because once we look at it as a positive, it is amazing how much more freeing that is. So when I first did my coaching qualifications, I remember one of the speakers as part of my training said the most successful people will fail more than the average person will try. And that blew my mind, because to me, if you all think of someone that you think is successful, you wouldn't expect them to fail. You wouldn't think they would get things wrong, but they got things wrong, and that's why they're successful, because they tried, they learned, they came back at it, they made adjustments, and they kept going. Even the army took it up a couple of years ago as a marketing ploy, fail forwards. So if we can fail bigger, if we can fail at the thing that we're doing, it means we're growing and learning and expanding what it is that we do. So just next time you think of anybody that you see as a success, just think of all the failures they've had. And I've been very lucky to interview some fantastic people, including the wonderful Olympian Chris Cook. He was my first ever guest, and I've left his episode on because I absolutely love it. And he said one of his biggest failures is one of his absolute biggest, lessons now, and he wouldn't stop it for the world. Although at the time it felt like it was awful. In hindsight, what it's meant he could do now, because he learned from that failure, he experienced that. And if you listen to any mindset coach, even celebrities, if you listen to sort of Jim Carrey or Denzel Washington, Will Smith, they all talk about this. All these people who are hugely successful at what they do, but they all will talk about that they learned more from their failures than they ever did from their successes. And so we see failure as a good thing because it means we're trying something. It takes away that fear factor. And it is just so freeing. So thank you for listening. I hope that has piqued your interest as to some of the conversations that we are going to have over the coming weeks and months. Most of my episodes will be like this, rambling on from me, sharing my thoughts on podcasts I've listened to, conversations I've had, workshops I may have delivered as they come up. But they will be sprinkled with little mini pinches of positivity, so little tools and tips that will be little mini episodes for you, and of course along with my wonderful guests that will be coming over the next few months. Thank you for listening. Please share this with anybody that you think would be interested, because I really want these conversations to be happening. I want us to open those floodgates, and I absolutely believe that the more we talk about this, the more we share these things, the stronger we are all for it. So hit subscribe, listen along, and let's get talking.